In the summer of 1972, an unassuming $500 Dodge Dart stunned everyone by leaving a big block Camaro in its dust. The secret weapon? Not a monstrous V8, but Chrysler's modest grocery getter Slant Six. Engineers quietly admired it as a stroke of brilliance, while corporate executives dismissed it as an embarrassment. Yet, on back roads stretching from the hills of Australia to the brutal climb of Pikes Peak, this engine proved itself a rebel. It became the heartbeat of a movement, an underdog that endured sabotage from within Chrysler, embarrassed powerful V8s, and built a cult following that still stands strong today. By the late 1950s, Chrysler could no longer ignore the truth. Its decades-old flathead straight six, a design dating back to 1929, had finally reached the end of the road. Once the dependable workhorse of sedans and pickups, it now seemed ancient compared to what the competition was offering. More importantly, the American car market itself was changing. The post-war obsession with massive, chrome-laden cruisers was cooling off, and imports from Europe and Japan were arriving in waves. Volkswagen, Fiat, and Datsun brought smaller, fuel-sipping cars with nimble handling and budget-friendly prices, making Detroit's oversized V8s look like relics from another era. Realizing it had to adapt quickly, Chrysler set out to build something leaner and smarter. The plan was simple on paper: design a compact car with an all-new six-cylinder engine to match. That car became the Plymouth Valiant, meant to rival the Ford Falcon and the Volkswagen Beetle. It was targeted squarely at young families, urban workers, and anyone who wanted affordability without sacrificing dependability. But there was a major snag. The brand new inline-six Chrysler design was too tall and too long to squeeze into the Valiant's smaller engine bay. Hood clearance was impossible, and the forward-mounted water pump only made things worse. Chrysler's compact car solution was suddenly at risk of collapsing before launch. In a smoke-filled engineering office, project leader William Wertman and his team pored over sketches late into the night, coffee cups scattered across the table. Every fix created new problems. Lowering the hood risked overheating, while shortening the block would sap power. Then, half in jest, someone suggested tilting the engine. What if the inline-six leaned over instead of standing tall? That joke became a revelation. By canting the engine 30 degrees to the right, they solved the clearance issue instantly. The cooling fan lined up with the radiator, the engine's height dropped just enough, and the weight distribution even improved. The solution wasn't complete, though. The bulky front water pump still stuck out, so the engineer shifted it to the side, freeing valuable inches. Engine mounts were slightly offset to balance the tilt, keeping the drivetrain stable. Just like that, Chrysler's troubled project had new life. The company christened it the Slant Six, a name as straightforward as the design itself. As Wertman later explained, their goal was to create an engine that was both efficient and unbreakable, a motor built to do more with less. The tilted layout wasn't just a packaging trick. It made routine maintenance easier, kept the car's center of gravity lower for improved handling, and gave mechanics better access to critical parts. When it debuted in 1960, the Slant Six powered not only the Valiant, but also the Dodge Dart Lancer and even Chrysler's higher-end models. It quickly earned a reputation as the Swiss Army knife of engines, adaptable, dependable, and ready for nearly any application. Chrysler even pushed boundaries at launch by offering the engine with an aluminum block. At the time, aluminum construction was reserved for exotic race cars and aircraft, not affordable family sedans. It sounded futuristic and gave Chrysler bragging rights, but the reality was harsher. The aluminum blocks were tricky to mass produce, expensive, and didn't win over the average buyer. Within a short time, Chrysler abandoned them, sticking with traditional cast iron for durability and cost savings. Inside, though, the Slant Six was anything but ordinary. Pistons were crafted from a tin-plated aluminum alloy, and the 225 cubic inch version even used a chrome-plated top piston ring to combat oil consumption problems that plagued earlier designs. Cylinder heads borrowed architecture from Chrysler's V8 lineup, not just as a shortcut, but as a strategic move. Using proven designs meant dealership mechanics already understood the parts, lowering repair costs and simplifying maintenance. It was smart, cost-conscious engineering: reuse what worked, avoid reinvention, and make sure the car stayed on the road. Even the intake manifold carried a distinctive personality. Nicknamed the bunch of bananas by gearheads, the twisted, looping runners looked strange, but served a purpose. Because the intake and exhaust ports shared the same side of the tilted engine, the manifold had to snake its way through a maze of components. The design wasn't about chasing horsepower, but about solving packaging problems and meeting new emission standards. The result was quicker warm-up times for intake air, good for emissions compliance, bad for performance. Airflow suffered, leaving hot rodders frustrated, but the everyday buyer didn't mind.
The 225 Slant Six had something most engines of its era didn't: an overbuilt foundation. Its thick cylinder walls and heavy-duty crankshaft gave it a kind of toughness that begged to be pushed beyond factory limits. Enthusiasts soon discovered this bottom end could take almost anything. Turbochargers, superchargers, nitrous. You name it, the Slant Six could handle it. During the 1980s and 90s, budget racers who didn't have the cash for small block swaps turned to these engines, wrenching together creative builds from junkyard parts. With a little ingenuity, they managed to put together motors that shocked V8 owners. One Kansas drag racer, Bill Rea, proved just how far it could go. His 1965 Barracuda, powered by a bored-out 225 with a custom intake setup, consistently ran in the 12-second quarter-mile range. People laughed when I first showed up, he admitted in an interview, but they weren't laughing when I crossed the line ahead of them. Even though Chrysler had abandoned the Slant Six by the late 1980s, the engine never really disappeared. Thanks to loyal fans, aftermarket parts suppliers, and now the power of social media, its reputation only grew. YouTube and car forums are full of builds ranging from resto mods to wild turbocharged sleepers. As one enthusiast put it, you can run it hot, drown it in sand, even try to blow it up, and it'll still keep asking for more. That kind of indestructibility earned it legendary status. But despite its brilliance, Chrysler itself never fully celebrated the engine. To the engineers who designed it, the Slant Six was a breakthrough: clever, efficient, and rugged. Yet Chrysler's executives saw it differently. They worried it didn't fit the company's image, which was built on fire-breathing Hemis and monster V8s. Marketing teams labeled it a grandma engine, and at just 145 horsepower in its standard 225 form, they argued it could never excite buyers. The clash between engineers who believed in innovation and executives who worshipped image nearly killed the project before it even launched. In fact, by 1958, there was already serious discussion about scrapping it altogether in favor of a detuned V8. The engine's chief architect, William Wiertman, had to fight hard to keep it alive. He and his team showed that the Slant Six would be cheaper to produce, more fuel efficient, and a perfect match for Chrysler's new compact cars. In the end, it wasn't passion that saved the engine, but economics. Developing a new V8 for the Valiant would have cost too much, so the accountants sided with the engineers. But there was a catch. Chrysler gave the Slant Six almost no marketing support. It was left to prove itself on the road without the fanfare given to the company's muscle car lineup. Some insiders later suggested this was intentional. Chrysler didn't want a six-cylinder to outshine their V8s, so they kept the Slant Six in the shadows. The company's chaotic carburetor strategy didn't help its case. From its launch in 1960 until the mid-1970s, the engine cycled through an endless mix of Carter, Holley, and even Stromberg carbs, sometimes chosen seemingly at random. Then came the infamous feedback carburetor experiment in the 80s, a mess of wires and vacuum hoses that ran so poorly, mechanics joked it made engines hop like a drunk kangaroo. By the mid-1970s, emissions rules tightened their grip. Chrysler was forced to make changes that strangled the Slant Six's performance. Horsepower ratings plummeted, hydraulic lifters replaced the more robust mechanical setup, and eventually even the forged steel crankshaft was swapped for a weaker cast version in the name of cost-cutting. Things only got worse when Chrysler tried lightweight aluminum intake manifolds, which cracked and leaked so often that mechanics nicknamed them Friday afternoon parts. By the early 1980s, the once mighty Slant Six was limping along with single-barrel carbs and unreliable electronics, a shadow of its former self. Production finally ended in the US during the late 80s, though Mexico and Australia kept it alive into the early 1990s. Incredibly, its last official role wasn't in muscle cars or trucks, but in boats, a humble fate for an engine that once left V8 Camaros eating dust. To some, this decline wasn't just sad, it felt like sabotage. Chrysler, obsessed with its big block image, had slowly neutered the Slant Six until it faded away. Yet, even as the company moved on, the legend refused to die. Backyard mechanics, hot rodders, and drag racers around the world kept experimenting, bolting on turbos, fuel injection, and even cross-flow hemihists borrowed from Australian variants. In garages and on drag strips, the Slant Six lived on faster and meaner than Chrysler ever intended. Bill Ray's drag car wasn't an exception. It became proof that the so-called grandma engine could hold its own against almost anything. The truth is, Chrysler never meant for the Slant Six to become legendary. It was designed to be practical, efficient, and cheap to build. But what happened instead was something no marketing campaign could manufacture. It built a loyal following. From Daytona to Pikes Peak, from Australian street machines to homemade turbo setups, the Slant Six proved that 6 cylinders could leave just as big a mark as any V8. And even today, its legacy is still being written.